right. So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation with Dave and Pete. Again, as I said, you can't talk about corporate startups and you can't talk about Pittsburgh without doing a little bit of autonomous vehicle stuff. To kind of wrap up today, we're going to do our next 5x5. Remember, so to me, like part of the most interesting things about conferences are these quick exposures to interesting people. And so Hallie and I, when we were talking about this, and Lou were like, well, how do we do that in a virtual conference? And so we came up with these 5 different people, 5 questions in roughly 10 minutes. And we have a fun one here. Adam Paulisick is a friend. He's also co-faculty member with me at Carnegie Mellon School. He's also the chief product officer and a senior partner at Headstorm. Adam, I think let's start with something you've been talking about in both of those roles, which is this term you've come up with, sales-led transformation. Maybe explain what that is to start out.
Sure. Thanks, Sean, for having me, and hello to everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to sort of share our work here at CMU and beyond. So sales-led transformation, it may be in context for a product-led transformation or an engineering-led transformation, is part of a movement where instead of exclusively focusing on users or people that have already converted to the services or product, it acknowledges that there's actually quite a difference between buyers of a service or a product and users of the service or product. But from a transformation point of view, it actually is a really important cultural tool to acknowledge that while product leadership and engineering leadership oftentimes sort of fight in the same laboratory and work out their friction against a roadmap, sales oftentimes can be wandering around the universe sort of promising what is opportunistically going to come next or kind of close the deal or in this moment. And so it's a common language and a vocabulary largely based on social selling archetypes and subtypes that helps even the most technical and profound engineers acknowledge some of the power in syncing with buyer vocabulary. And at the same time, it acknowledges the language that buyers speak via sellers that can be better communicated to product owners. So that's the start of it, and explores a variety of exercises in both good and bad economies about how to bring products to market.
I do want to get to the economy in a minute, but maybe just give us an example to make this real first. So where has this worked well?
Sure. So let me give you 2 examples in the same industry. Let's call it healthcare. It seems to be top of mind opportunistically for everyone these days. And so there's sort of a public-facing use case around a really interesting technology company called Curantis. They had sort of pioneered the idea of something that unfortunately is more relevant today than ever, which is hospice care in a connected world, especially when those of us can't be in person for people, unfortunately, moving on to the next pasture in this life. They had this challenge where they started as a venture-backed or a private equity-backed company. They came out to the market, did what most really innovative companies do, which is find their niche and expand. At some point, though, they needed to scale, and they needed to understand how to not just be a great niche player, but start to play collaboratively or even competitively in the top 10 of the marketplace. But what had happened is the engineering had gotten so capacity constrained that they no longer understood how to create scale, stability, and security that was flexible. Product owners were working so hard to retain those early adopters that they weren't sure how to expand their market view. And salespeople had fatigued everyone who was on the original fringe of their go-to-market that now needed to sort of understand how to take this translation of innovative message and sort of bring it to it. So sales-led transformation brought all 3 of those groups together. And instead of focusing on moments of sort of delight or utility inside the product lens, started to talk in terms of sort of success or failure or acceptance in the buying phase. Then it brought the engineers much closer to the why instead of the what. It brought the product owners, with an ability to not only prioritize sort of friction reduction, but it also really focused them on this idea of what's going to get to the yes, which is going to ultimately pull their product roadmap forward. A quick mirror to that on the large kind of corporate side, we just completed a significant transformation on a multi-billion-dollar EHR and EMR. Their challenge was, much of the same, but M&A focused, where they needed a way to have the senior most leadership talk about the same roadmap together that didn't compete with delivery of cost and expensive engineering with sort of the delight and demand for future customers.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned it already, but how's the fact we're in a recession influence the importance of this?
Sure. Well, the interesting work, as Sean knows, but for others, of my entire philosophy at CMU and the research I focus on is about provocative or challenge-based methods of communication. And this actually was spawned in 2008, or at least my awareness to it. And there was this article, in a down economy, you must provoke your customers. Well, as we all know on the phone, intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs sort of operate in a down economy all the time in the innovative landscape. So because of that, we are resource constrained and lack of OpEx and CapEx. What that bred, though, is this provocative and challenge-based method actually leading the way that organizations are going to start to transform. So instead of being iterative and incremental, right, or instead of having a bunch of experimentation, we started talking in terms of the largest transactions that those in product engineering and sales could come together and work. And of course, that's amplified in not only a virtual economy that we're at today to be more focused and prioritized, but what it also means is we are no longer allowing kind of custom derivative work to monopolize the conversation at enterprise level relationships. And that's, of course, at the core and the spirit of sales-led transformation.
That's awesome. Okay, so people are nodding their head along thinking, okay, I need to do this because we have these islands of product, we have these islands of marketing, right? How do I let kind of sales have a voice in this? How do they get involved with you, learn more? Where did they learn more? That kind of thing.
Sure. So I, occasionally ramble via LinkedIn and otherwise. One of the things that, us lowly adjunct professors do quite often is actually run what I'm sure Sean has shared with you, which is these kind of 2-hour primer sessions to figure out if this is a method that actually fits within a window you want to create change. So the commitment to any transformation, digital or otherwise, is an alignment of all of these major pillars of stakeholders. Sales-led transformation is actually not traditionally led by the sales organization. It typically comes from the engineering or product organization with high alignment with the revenue leaders. So you can always find me, of course, at headstorm.com or on LinkedIn /Paulisick, sort of everywhere the internet has me to be. But, I also write on Medium and LinkedIn as well. And then if you ping me at Paulisick, at headstorm.com, I'm happy to also send around some sort of spark notes and some primer TED Talks, books that I've read. I'll spare you the 1,000, books and magazines I've read along the way and kind of give you the top 25 or so that really help you sink your teeth into this provocative versus consultative way of thinking and how social selling archetypes actually play into inventive product and engineering leadership.
Awesome. Now I wanted for the kind of fifth and final question, move away from Adam, the adjunct professor, Adam, the chief product officer, and talk a little bit about your role on the kind of nonprofit PIT tech ecosystem side. So you co-founded the shop in Homewood, which for people who aren't from Pittsburgh is not as economically advantageous a part of Pittsburgh as, for example, Shady Side, which is right by Carnegie Mellon University. Maybe talk a little bit though about the shop, what led you to start it, and kind of just the success that's been in the Homewood region.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. If I had a love language, it's inclusive entrepreneurship. It's the thing that I think about more than probably any other cause or problem on the planet today, which is the idea of not allowing the only form of entrepreneurship to be building technology, but rather oftentimes enabling really interesting services or ideas with technology. And so the shop is about a 5,500, maybe nearly 6,000 square foot space that at one point was a combination of auto mechanic and I think tow company that we bought before it became a classic car collection mechanism. And what we call Homewood, this incredibly vibrant neighborhood had big roots in manufacturing, Westinghouse, some of the most diverse but also inclusive economic kind of industry focus in Pittsburgh before some of the collapse when malls pulled everybody out of the city. And started thinking a lot about how we could bring internet and technology and created this cashless co-working space in its first evolution. The singular metric, as you know, Sean, but for others we had in the first 3 or 4 years of operating was getting the actual community members to come in and touch the back wall of the building. That was our singular way of deciding.
That's the KPI.
That was. And we did things a little differently. Like we supported and invested in a barbershop and natural hair salon, which became our marketing department, driving nearly 600 unique visitors a month, which is by website standards, maybe no small joke for qualified visitors. We had some really interesting artists that focused on STEM and really involved the museum system and sort of pulled those cultural institutions into the East End. We sponsored our first artist in residence, which now is the leading muralist, focused on the Black Lives Matter movement in Pittsburgh and launching, the Butterfly Collective and the Black Monarch Collective, which is bringing and promoting the right messages at the right time. But since then, we've invested in all sorts of interesting ideas, everything from frozen food carts with teenage entrepreneurs that was a free cart as long as their Nuval or nutrition scores were low poolside, which of course is less COVID friendly than other things.
Sure.
Screen printing equipment. And this, just started our first, teenage investment fund to work out of the shop where thanks to Comcast, there's more than $20,000 of iPads and technology and tablets available for anyone to come in. Now, admittedly, the shop temporarily is a rescue and emergency site for the schooling system to support children that are without a safe environment otherwise. But around that, in a safe and conscious space, we're excited to get back to our day-to-day programming, hopefully as soon as spring.
And if people want to know about the shop, what's the website for that?
Well, as a good web entrepreneur, I managed to actually find my way to the hearts and souls of whoever owned theshop.org originally and finagle that from everybody else. But our Instagram, the Shop PGH, is probably the most robust and interesting 4-year journey that shows everything from Pardon's and Expungement's workshop as a major enabler to nutrition technology to the engineering director at Slack and everybody in between, including, I think, even people at Edge came through during the last rotation. So we're fortunate that we've had quite the platform and appreciative of the support. And like always, I'm excited to talk with everyone and anyone that wants to turn physical real estate into a digital platform for underutilized communities.
Awesome. Hey, Adam, thanks for doing this, man. Really, really appreciate it. Have a great one.
Of course. Thanks, everybody.
Guys,
pleasure to speak.
We're going to head to the last content weaving of the day, which Luma Santi is going to head up. So head over there now.